I'm Ben Reiman, and this is Behavior Speak.
When I was in the US, I remember that when I went to schools, even the teachers, the way that they would interact with students was behavioral in nature. You know, you have consequences for your behavior. You've made your choice. This is the result. You know, things like that for me, they're completely behavioral. In Israel, it doesn't really exist. It made sense. The readings that I done, the materials that I was exposed to, it just made sense of the world. And I was completely turned on. So that was the beginning of it. And I immediately knew that I want to learn more about behavior analysis, and that I want to be involved in instruction and training. I was very good at it. I think I still am. But my passion was to instruct people. We're, for years now, maybe more than a decade, have made attempts to achieve formal recognition as a profession, despite the very high demand for behavior analysts in the field. We're unsuccessful in terms of having the government recognize it by law.
In this conversation, Shiri Ayvazo discusses the current state of applied behavior analysis services in Israel, focusing on the funding, accessibility, and the role of behavior analysts in education. We explore the history and development of behavior analysis in Israel, the challenges faced by practitioners, and the training and certification processes. The conversation also touches on international perspectives, professional development, and future goals for behavior analysis in Israel. Welcome, Shiri.
Thank you, Ben. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge I am producing this podcast on the territories of the Kalam and Klehus, Homoko, Comox, and Sechelt First Nations. So, Shiri, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Tell you a little bit about myself. I am a behavior analyst. I was previously a teacher, a physical education teacher. I got my initial training at the bachelor level in Israel. And I got my advanced training, my MA and my Ph.D. in the US at the Ohio State University. I worked there for a while. I'm now back in Israel. I work here as a behavior analyst. I'm chairing the master's program in applied behavior analysis at Kinneret College. I'm also directing a certification program in applied behavior analysis at the David Yellin Academic College. And I also do some clinical work with children in the Ministry of Education. So that's, in a nutshell of what I do. I live in Israel. You got that.
Yeah. And where do you live in Israel?
I live in central Israel.
Yeah. So like in a major city, or?
It's pretty large. I think it's the fifth largest in Israel. It's very close to the center, Tel Aviv. It would be considered a suburb of Tel Aviv.
Gotcha.
Yeah, a very crowded place.
Yeah. And these two universities that you work at, are they both kind of Tel Aviv universities, or?
They're actually quite remote from where I live. So the David Yellin Academic College is in Jerusalem, which is about 45 minutes from here, driving without traffic. But there is always traffic, so you can double that time. And Kinneret College is on the Sea of Galilee, up in the north, a beautiful, beautiful place. And that's about 2 hours drive from where I live. So I commute quite a lot.
Yeah. Busy.
But I get to do what I love.
That's all that matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So your bachelor's degree, was that the teaching degree? Is that sort of where you got into teaching?
Yeah, it's a teaching degree. So I went to college, teacher's college. I've always done sports. I was a tennis player and a tennis coach. So I enrolled in a physical education teaching degree, a bachelor degree. And on the third year, I was exposed to applied behavior analysis and its application through sports with children with special needs, mostly children with challenging behaviors, behavior conduct, and the like. And that's where my, entire vision and world in terms of knowledge and understanding and aspiration has changed, because as soon as I was exposed to behavior analysis, everything just clicked. It made sense. The readings that I'd done, the materials that I was exposed to, it just made sense of the world. I came to know some rules and some facts that I experienced on myself in reality, and suddenly they get a name, terms, and some evidential background, like evidence-based stuff, and I was completely turned on. So that was the beginning of it, and I immediately knew that I want to learn more about behavior analysis, and that I want to be involved in instruction and training. I was very good.
Do you have a certification with the International Behavior Analysis Organization, the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or are certified through your region's Behavior Analyst Credentialing Board? You can earn continuing education units for this episode by going to www.behaviorspeak.com and clicking on CEUs. The first secret word is funding.
At it. I think I still am, but my passion was to instruct people. Yeah, and that was the beginning of a pretty long career. I've been doing this for 25 years now.
Wow. Okay, so
It's a long time.
So 20 plus years ago, you're exposed to behavior analysis. Was that in Israel?
Yeah, it was in Israel.
So how far back does kind of behavior analysis go in Israel then? Do you know?
Good question. So I think when I studied behavior analysis, it was like a specialty track, a specialization within my 4-year degree. It was new. I think I was perhaps the third year of studies in behavior analysis in Israel. It was really brand new. It was basically imported by maybe 2 or 3 people that studied in the US, Dr. Eitan Eldar, Professor Amos Roleider. These were at least the ones that I knew. And they got their training in the US and in Canada. And they came back to Israel and opened some certification programs to teach others behavior analysis. And that's how I was exposed to it. And at the time, there were only 2 programs where you could learn behavior analysis. It was very new. It was novice. The curriculum was pretty thin. Not too many hours, no literature, especially not in English, especially not in Hebrew, in the native language. And I think these 2 programs were, I guess, the place to go to if you wanted to learn behavior analysis for at least a decade, until more people became qualified, and other programs began to rise. I think now in Israel, the situation is different. When I was trained, I assumed there were maybe a dozen behavior analysts, maybe 2 dozens of behavior analysts in Israel. Today, we probably have close to 2,000 plus minus of behavior analysts in Israel, working across the country in different application settings. Yeah.
That's pretty big.
Would you say that it's big?
Well, how maybe tell me a little bit about Israel as far as sort of size and how many people are there. That might help me tell.
Well, Israel is the size of New Jersey.
Okay.
In terms of its geographical area, and I think it's maybe close to 10 million. I need to check that, but it's a pretty small country.
Yeah.
And it's also pretty young. So I think we're quite advanced to our developmental stage. I think we're kind of advanced, but if I compare us to other countries, maybe not. That was in 2000. The proximity to the US, Canada and the US, I would assume that the proximity would influence a faster advancement of behavior analysis in Canada.
Well, and especially considering how expensive it is for us to attend American universities. As you know, we're no different than any other international students. Yeah, it hasn't. So I'm surprised. I'm surprised to hear that even 20 years ago you had 2 programs. That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would characterize the Israeli people as innovative, diligent, always trying to be ahead of the curve. So I guess that we are fortunate enough to have those 2 scholars that came back to Israel.
Yeah.
And initiated launching those programs and providing the opportunity for families and kids here in Israel to enjoy the applied behavior analytics services because they are very well needed, as you probably know.
Yeah. And so when they brought behavior analysis to Israel, it was primarily for sort of, autism, special needs kind of services. That was the main reason to bring.
It was generally special needs, but I think I would characterize the 2 programs quite different in terms of, I think one was more autism based, clinical service at the private sector, or mainly geared towards populations on the spectrum. Whereas the other program that was housed in the teaching college was more geared towards the work of the applied behavior analysts within the Ministry of Education. And these could be 2 different creatures providing autism service wherever that may be, but excluding the Ministry of Education. And being a behavior analyst within the Ministry of Education. And I think that distinction still exists until today with it's very pronounced. The discussion is always around, are you doing behavior analysis in the Ministry of Education? Therefore, you might interact or meet students with ADHD, or students with autism, or students with learning disabilities, or any other disability that if the student is entitled for service, you provide the service. And it might not be intensive service,
right,
as it would be listed in the protocols, because it's a public service. It's one among other therapies that are being provided by the Ministry of Education. And, the more conventional behavior analytics services to children with autism, as you know them, EIBI, early intensive behavioral interventions at home, and so on. So I think these are the 2 tracks, like bold tracks that exist in Israel up until today.
And
do you recognize that distinction in Canada as well between those who work within the educational system and those in the private sector?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, and I'll get into this shortly too. It's all sort of funding dependent, right? And so we don't have a sort of national autism sort of strategy or policy. There's work being done on that right now. But so right now it really varies from province to province. For those maybe not familiar with Canada, we have 10 provinces and a couple territories, and each province kind of does things differently. And in BC, we have funding for autistic kids that are aged 2 to 6, and they get a sort of a lump sum of money every year. That's $22,000 a year. And they can spend that on kind of ABA. They can spend it on SLPs, OTs, I think physical therapy as well. And then when those kids turn 6, that funding drops dramatically to about $6,000 a year, with the idea that the Ministry of Education would take over, sort of providing those services. However, I don't think ABA services have only recently, I think, become sort of a normal part of the school system. And so for a long time, it was sort of, generic services, kind of where that would end up.
Does ABA in Canada has a formal? Does it have a formal status in terms of regulation?
No. So that's the other thing, I think. And so unlike the US, where, most states have some sort of licensure that's sort of, required to practice, or in Canada where, SLPs or psychologists or doctors, whoever, have to be a member of the college of said field and so on. Behavior analysis is sort of the Wild West, and really, except for Ontario, which only recently, like I think maybe it's in the last year, I think it was maybe a year ago this summer, brought in regulation. And so now in Ontario, it is regulated. They have the RBA regulation. They've done away with, no longer can you become a BCBA in Ontario. They don't recognize the credential anymore. It's fully this RBA thing, and it sounds great. BC is probably, if I'm thinking positive, optimistically, maybe in the next 5 years we'll be at a place of regulation. Not sure about the other provinces. So right now, no, it's so anyone can, certainly with early intervention, there seems to be more rules, but once children turn 6, and certainly once folks become adults, there's a wide range of folks that can identify as a behavior consultant, as they're called, with a wide variety of training. Sometimes ABA, sometimes not.
Well, it sounds quite similar to the status here in Israel. You have a forecast of 5 years. I'm hoping that would happen. That's a good forecast. I would buy it any minute.
Yeah.
5 years to be 5 years ahead and to be regulated. I think we are in the same status. Anyone can practice behavior analysis in Israel. There is some light regulation in the Ministry of Education of who can be a behavior analyst, mostly defined by the program which he was trained in. Which he was trained. If the program is recognized by regulatory bodies like previously the BCB, but we no longer work with the BCB, so now the ABAI. And we're for years now, maybe more than a decade, have made attempts to achieve formal recognition as a profession. Despite the very high demand for behavior analysts in the field, we're unsuccessful in terms of having the government recognize it by law. It's a difficult process. Not only we have to work to convince, external partners like people from other disciplines, psychologists and others, we also have our internal disagreements from time to time.
Sure.
On the identity of behavior analysis, how it should operate in the state of Israel, and so on. So these are all hurdles in the process.
I'm curious, what does funding look like for ABA services?
There is no funding for ABA services in Israel because it's directly tied to the lack of the formal recognition as a profession. Therefore, it cannot be funded. Services cannot be funded by insurance companies. So mainly only families that can afford to have a behavior analyst on board privately, so they pay it out of their own pocket.
Wow.
But in terms of the educational system that does provide behavior analytics services, then a student who's recommended for behavior analytics services would get them, and that would be funded by the states. That could cover anywhere between 1 to 3 hours a week, or even less than that. 1 hour a week or 1 hour a month, depending on where that is. So it's not a lot, but that's be provided by the public services. Other than that, there is no formal body that provides funding for children with special needs. So that's why it's so pressing to have formal recognition.
It just seems like we've got a bit of a bit of confusion with your numbers. You've had behavior analysis for 20 plus years. You have 2,000 behavior analysts in the country, and yet,
More, yeah, around 2000.
yeah, and yet, in order for those 2,000 behavior analysts to be working, it's either private pay from those who can afford it, or those in the education system. How many behavior analysts would you hazard have an opportunity to work in the education system? Is there many? Are there many?
Yeah, I would assume that half, if not more than half, of the rough estimation of how many practicing behavior analysts are in Israel, I would assume that a half or more are those who work within the educational system, which means that they hold a teaching certificate and they can be formally be hired
I
by the
see.
Ministry of Education.
I see. So they're not hired as behavior
Yeah.
analysts. They're teachers that have training in behavior analysis.
They have to have their teaching certificate.
Right.
Yeah, they have to have their teaching certificate in order to be hired by the Ministry of Education,
I see.
be it if they work as teachers or as behavior analysts. I think it's important to note that a quite large audience of our students in the different programs are mostly teachers who come to get, additional training, additional professional
Yeah.
training, and some of them, if not the majority, transition from being a teacher in the classroom to a behavior and analyst in the system. So they do kind of a shift in their career, but they remain within the same organization.
With the common theme being that they're all teachers originally.
Yeah. And that's another point for discussion here in our community, in our professional community. Does a behavior analyst have to have a teaching certificate to practice behavior analysis? Because, for example, we do have some occasionally that come and do not have a teaching background. So they graduate with a certification in behavior analysis or maybe a master's degree in behavior analysis, but they would not be able to be hired to work as a behavior analyst in the educational system. As is today, they would have to get additional courses to get a supplementary teaching certificate. Say they would need to go to more classes, get additional training. That's some of our disagreements has to do with that point, for example, with that issue.
Is there enough work then for the folks that aren't working in the school system?
Absolutely. Very high demand, very high demand. And the settings into which you are getting into in the public system, the conditions are not always best to provide an effective intervention. So you work under, I would say, challenging conditions, right? You might not have the ability to provide intensive intervention. You don't always have partners that mediate the behavioral intervention that are motivated to comply and motivated to provide the service with high integrity. So it's not that easy to provide the service as we would want to, as we teach it, for example. But there is high demand for behavior analysts because they do provide very meaningful assistance to students or to children that have not shown any improvement or maybe mild improvement when treated with other support. So it's very popular, but yet in terms of, state-wise, it's not recognized yet. We do have objections, like in any country. The autism community itself, advocates of the autism community, they show their opposition to the profession. Some other professions might, they're hesitant in accepting us as fellows to the therapies table, and some don't. So it's a long way that we still have a long way. I wish I was in your situation where I could, forecast that in the next 5 years we'll be able to complete this important step. But we have been trying for over a decade. So many challenges here.
How did ABA become in such high demand in Israel?
Evidence. It's effective. It's effective where other therapies have failed. As simple as that. There are many cases here, many children that display very challenging behaviors and cannot be included into their natural environment, natural settings, interact with others, and so on. And with those very challenging cases, people have learned just to look for the behavior analysts on board that could join. And behavior analysis in Israel is mostly associated with the lower functioning individuals, as appropriate for the lower functioning individuals and so on. And I think the analytic nature of our profession, the effectiveness, documenting the achievements, the changes in behavior, in that sense, we're very different than any other support that is being provided here in Israel. I have to say, the education in Israel and higher education in Israel is not behavioral in nature. So the behavior analytic training is very unique. People are inducted in Israel for years to the developmental psychology strand, mostly. So they're not very acquainted with behavioral education. When I was in the US, I remember that when I went to schools, even the teachers, the way that they would interact with students was behavioral in nature. You have consequences for your behavior. You've made your choice. This is the result. Things like that, that for me, they're completely behavioral. In Israel, it doesn't really exist. So being behavior analyst in Israel means that you have adopted a very different epistemology that other people would look at you and they wouldn't understand your reasoning. How does that make sense to you? So, you know, um, so maybe that's one of the reasons why only the severe cases, those with the most challenging behaviors, are being, rooted to behavior analysis and not a daily routine, a daily education, an average, layman's wisdom. Yeah.
And so, with it being private pay, are there then, I guess there's a lot of families that are missing out?
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about therapy for the rich people, right? High socioeconomic status. Absolutely. There are many who cannot afford the service. So you'd have to be pretty strong financially to be able to hire a behavior analyst. And if you're not located in central Israel, it's even more difficult to find those behavior analysts, good ones that can do, good work and show results. And that's why we're struggling for the recognition, because as long as the situation remains as is, you wouldn't have behavior analytic being accessible to whoever needs it. In one of my projects with Professor Midan from University of North Carolina, and one of my good colleagues, Chagit Inbar First from David Yellin, we have used the IPICS program, which is a digital program designed to train adults to foster social communication of young children with developmental disabilities and autism. And it's a program developed by Professor Midan. She's Israeli. We had discussions about how inaccessible behavior analysis is in Israel. She built the program on the rationale of, in the US, people live far remotely from one another. So you would provide services online. In Israel, we looked at it and said, well, this program could be fantastic in Israel for those who simply cannot afford, A, and B, do not have the education and training that they need to promote social communication of young children. So we have tailored that program and validated it, and now we provide it free of charge.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? How does that work?
Well, it has 6 modules. It's evidence-based program, so they're quite substantial literature on IPEX. It's 6 modules. Each module is between 5 to 8, maybe 9 minutes. Each module concentrates or focused on one particular skill. For example, time delay or modeling and so on. And basically trains the person in 6 minutes on the strategy, what it is, how to use it. You get to see a video. You get to see sequence of actions of what you need to do to execute the skill with the child. And yeah, that's a quick training that everyone can use, be it the aide in the classroom, a therapist that, for example, a therapist for a child who is included in a regular classroom. It could be parents. It could be brothers, sisters, siblings, older siblings that support the child. It could be basically everyone or anyone, sorry. So yeah, I often get to think a lot about accessibility to services to those who cannot afford it. Because, for example, literature is difficult to use. People in Israel speak Hebrew. Some of them speak English, not a problem. But for those who do not have, higher education, their English is it would be a beginner's English. They wouldn't be able to go online and read stuff. So yeah, we have to be minded of how to make those services more accessible. Absolutely.
And so you've obviously done some work on this. How effective are these sort of 6 to 9 minute videos? What sort of effects have you seen?
Well, in terms of the use in the U.S., they're fairly to strongly effective. The effectiveness has been validated both in terms of the actual skills that adults demonstrate and in terms of the level of confidence that they report of interacting with the child.
Gotcha.
So that's the theme or the findings in the research being done in the US. In Israel, we're at the phase of teaching and exposing those modules to the different audiences, but I haven't began researching it, like collecting data on people who actually use it and how it affects their skill set and how it changes the social communication of the child that they're using it with. So much work to do, Ben, not enough time. There are also not a lot of researchers here in Israel. So we're very few in terms of research. So that's also another layer of difficulties. With no research, no local research, it's very difficult to promote the local knowledge.
So how many training programs are there now in Israel?
I would assume maybe 12, 13, something like that. Yeah.
And are these all graduate level and higher, or bachelor level, or?
They would be considered postgraduate, meaning people who have their bachelor degree or master's and higher, and they get a certification. And there is only one program that is a degree program, and that's MA program. All the rest are certification programs.
I see.
Yeah.
So those certification programs then probably don't have a lot of research happening in them because they're just...
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah, it's just the one master's program.
Mostly those who work in certification program, the faculty, the instructors are mostly professionals, full-time professionals that work in the field. Some are very veteran, experienced, excellent, role models in terms of the professional behavior analyst. And some are quite new. You would also have incidences where a brand new behavior analyst just graduated from the certification program, who's being hired as faculty. That can also happen. And it does influence over time, it does influence on the quality of training. So, in my estimation, in the past, I don't know, 5 years, with the growth of programs in Israel, the level of training has been diminished. And you would see it on the graduates that come to an interview and want to be hired, and the breadth of experiences that they had, and the extent or depth of knowledge and understanding of the behavior analytic theory and research. I think, that's my personal impression, but I'm concerned. I'm concerned of the level of training. And that's also a reflection of lack of regulation.
Are these certification programs in depth enough to qualify these folks for any of the credentials like the IBA or the QBA or?
Yeah, in the past we had this informal practice in Israel that a certification program has to follow the recommendations by a governing body, like the BACB, for example. So it wasn't written anywhere, but it was expected, and it was common. I think once the transition, the
The second secret word is regulation.
BACBs, withdraw from the international countries, Israel being included, Canada, I don't think, but maybe now, I think Canada is included, right?
Canada is
They
still,
withdrew from Canada as well?
no, they're still here.
Okay. So they withdrew from Israel. And then in that gap, maybe programs tempted to maybe provide a little less. But I think overall, most of the years, the programs have maintained the basic requirements. So in terms of types of content, curriculum that they would teach, and in terms of the breadth of hours. So for example, if 240 hours was recommended, then most of the programs have complied with that recommendation. Yeah. But then again, the training is different because you're not trained by a PhD. You're not trained by someone who's necessarily well versed in behavior analysis at the theory level, at the research level, at the practice level, experience, the full package. And that also affects the quality of training. How many programs are there in Canada?
Yeah. So we do have some of the programs like you described, like these sort of postgraduate certificate programs for teachers. Those are usually kind of, embedded or often embedded in the graduate level training. So maybe the graduate level training is a couple of years, 6 months of that could be a certificate or something like that. Or there are just separate certification programs. But we have, so in British Columbia, we have one University of British Columbia has a master's and a doctoral level program. I think Manitoba, the University of Manitoba is probably the oldest ABA program. Some of the really early, actually, like ABA in the 50s and 60s was done in kind of Manitoba and Saskatchewan. In fact, one of the very first, some argue the very first behavior analytic article, the psychiatric nurse as the behavioral engineer article or something like that, was
University of Manitoba?
it was, I think it was in an American university. The participants were at a Saskatchewan institution. So the psychiatric nurses were working in Saskatchewan in Canada. But yeah, so University of Manitoba has a program, and then Ontario has Brock University and Western University, which have master's programs, and Brock has a doctorate program, and now Western has just started the first online Ph.D. program. And then scattered across Canada, there are several more undergraduate degrees in behavior analysis. Yeah.
Undergraduate degree in behavior analysis. Interesting.
Yeah.
And once they graduate, they can practice behavior analysis, provide services, interventions?
Well, sort of. I mean, I think part of it is the lack of regulation makes that easy. So there's the BCABA credential, right? The board certified assistant behavior analyst. And so those bachelor's degrees qualify them to write that exam, and they usually include a practicum and whatnot. And so they can practice as BCABAs, still needing to be under supervision of a BCBA. But again, in those provinces where it's not regulated, someone with a bachelor's degree in behavior analysis can, work independently. And Capilano University, which is in British Columbia, has an excellent undergraduate program. They were recently audited, is the right word. I think maybe audited by some folks from ABAI, I believe. And they said, I'm paraphrasing, but because I was talking to one of the directors, they said that they only had one criticism of the program, was that it was more rigorous than most of the master's level programs they had assessed, and suggest maybe they tone it down a bit, which they did not. And it's been great. And so, like in our company, again, it's not required that you be a BCBA to work. We have a positive behavior support agency. I mean, I try to hire BCBAs, but we've had some great staff that have come out of that Capilano program that have been done just as well as the BCBA trained folks. So, yeah, so it's interesting. Once regulation comes in, that'll all change, of course. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the training programs, do they hire Ph.D. faculty, or they can hire master's level or even lower than that?
Yeah, they tend to be PhD faculty for the most part, and obviously, and then sort of PhD students will teach as well in the programs as sort of adjunct professors. But yeah, they're generally PhD folks.
Yeah. So we have only one master's program, and we do not have PhD programs, obviously. So we don't have a PhD program that can nurture the MA program with PhD doctoral students that could teach. So everything is kind of interlocked together, right? If we don't provide higher education behavior analysis, we won't have quality behavior analysts. We won't be able to promote research in behavior analysis and so on. So I think these are maybe natural phases and processes of growth. Not so recently, but I think it was in 2022. In 2022, an article by a group of European colleagues, Keenan et al. Myself, I participated in that. We've published a paper in Behavior Analysis and Practice on the professional development of behavior analyses across Europe, and we gave a snapshot of countries. So this article was a product of previous discussions that we have done together as a group. We met often and talked about the different processes that each country is going through. And it was interesting to note that in a historical view, I guess, the countries go through similar growth pattern, just the pace is different. Surprisingly, I thought that Israel was located somewhere in a good place in the middle. There are some countries that are, in a previous stage in their development, and some that are more advanced. So, for example, countries with maybe one or two behavior analysts in the country with no professional organization and so on. So I think we've been there in 2000.
Yeah, I've interviewed some of those folks. Some folks, particularly some of the former Soviet countries and Eastern European countries where there's just one behavior analyst or no behavior analyst. Some folks in...
Yeah, the differences are quite large. It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing to learn on the, developmental roots and nature of each country.
So this one master's program, do those students then do they write?
They write thesis equivalents in Israel. The institutions that can allow for thesis and dissertations, they're only universities. Only in universities you could go through a thesis and dissertation work. Colleges do not, and Kinneret is a college. It's a thesis equivalent, and I have two things to comment about that. First, we get the same feedback from graduates, be it graduates from the MA program or graduates from certification program. They always argue that or assert that their studies were much more difficult than their bachelor's or their previous master's program.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's a common feedback. It always amazes me. So sometimes it makes me wonder what's going on in other disciplines. How do they train and why
Hmm.
are we
Hmm.
considered more rigorous, more intense? Maybe the accountability that we hold, I don't know.
Hmm.
So that's one. And the other is that at Kinneret College, for example, as the chair of the MA program, I can share that we are striving to collaborate with Ph.D. programs in the US
Hmm.
that would be a good outlet for our students to continue for a PhD.
Right.
Because if they want to continue in behavioral analysis, it would be difficult for them to find a home for that in Israel because there is no university that teaches behavior analysis. There is opposition in some of the institutions, and there are no PhDs there that were trained in behavior analysis and would be happy to entertain and recruit students. We just simply don't have that. So we have to find international outlets.
Are these programs all taught in Hebrew?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, they're all taught in Hebrew. We do, expose students to English. They read in English. We teach the terms in English. Say they would be familiar with stimulus control or differential reinforcement. They would recognize the terms in English and so on. But yeah, the curriculum is being taught in Hebrew, unless we have professor from an international country, and we do, so that professor teaches in English, but that's only one or two classes, not more than that. So language is a barrier.
And are there materials, or is there work being done to translate materials, training materials, or literature, or whatnot?
Across the years I see some projects going on. I could say on myself, because I'm an active researcher, I have published a couple of, pieces, manuscripts in Hebrew, just because it's important to make the literature accessible to everyone. So I can't invest a lot of time in writing in Hebrew, but I do, try to invest some of my time to have at least one manuscript published in Hebrew every year. So there's accumulating
Mm-hmm.
effect here. But I think I'm the only one that does that. We do have one book in Hebrew by one of our previous colleagues. Eitan Eldar has published a textbook in Hebrew, so that's being used. And I think lately one of our colleagues in Israel has translated, and I
Mm.
think this will be the first translated the book by Heward on behavioral contracts.
Mm.
So that's another piece that was added into the Hebrew literature. And I'm hoping that we'll see more initiatives like this.
And I wonder if there's any move to sort of create, like, for the IBAO, like, or the QABA, like a Hebrew exam.
Perhaps, we've been in the past in correspondence with the board, and we were, I think, one of the earlier countries that have made agreements with the board and got the exam translated, the BCBA exam
Wow.
translated at the graduate and the undergraduate level into Hebrew. I was one of the participants in local board of translators and validators of the exam in Hebrew. We had that going for a couple of years, but not very many behavior analysts actually signed for the exam. Not very many of them have took the exam because, it wasn't mandatory. We had some internal opposition as well from behavior analysts and programs. Opposition to take the BACB exam as an external exam that is not modified and doesn't fit the culture in Israel and so on. So in terms of other future exams of other external organizations, in my opinion, Israel has finished its chapter of interacting with international boards. I think that Israel is seeking for an internal accreditation, recognition without any ties or dependencies on international agendas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it something that the Canadian audience is looking at as a possibility?
Well, I think as long as
We
the
don't have
BAC,
the language barrier.
we don't have the language barrier, but I think also the BACB hasn't talked about pulling out. So they're still certifying folks today in Canada. And I don't think there's any plans to stop. So there's less motivation.
Yeah, but other organizations can, uh, how do I say that? They can also participate within the country and provide competition to the one single organization that does exist.
Yeah. And I haven't seen much of that. I've seen of some folks that have, myself included, that have, gotten the IBA credential just to sort of, I think, show some solidarity. But I don't know that there are many folks recognizing the IBA or the QBA credential as a thing here, or even necessarily even know what it is. I've always been open to sort of hiring. I've yet to have an IBA apply to work here. I mean, because there's also sort of typically anyone that sort of comes over to Canada will end up then getting a BCBA or something. I think is sort of typically folks that move from overseas abroad to North America are coming here so they can become a BCBA. So I think the only sort of competition will be the regulation. And so, and once there's a regulatory board and it sort of basically replaces the credential, that will be something. And I think that will be more local informed. And I think that'd be pretty cool for sure, because we still do see, the effects of America in the BACB codes and whatnot. A lot of the work down there was written for the insurance mandate in the U.S. and some of the cultural pieces were kind of designed for that.
So would you say that there is a gap between the regulatory and mandated needs that are tailored for the US and what you need in Canada? Do you see a gap here? That what's stated in the US does not always fit Canada properly?
I think there probably is. I think I don't know enough about what's happening in the U.S. I don't really pay a lot of attention to what's happening in the States. And typically with the podcast, if I bring American guests on, I don't want to talk about what's happening in your state. I want to talk about sort of how your work affects sort of wider groups and whatnot. It's pretty messy down there. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how funding changes if regulation comes in, because we do have, some insurance options, extended health and whatnot, that might then cover some things for folks. But yeah, it's hard to say where that's going to go.
Absolutely. Having insurance companies fund ABA services is absolutely a dream for us.
Yeah. I think also we have unique funding because we have universal health care here, right? Where the U.S. doesn't. And so insurance covers all services in the U.S. Whereas, in Canada, you don't require any insurance to sort of get basic, medical services, hospital services and whatnot. Regulation might be a step forwards towards some of that being covered.
That's similar to Israel. In Israel, there is also universal health insurance model. Yeah, absolutely. So, people basically have the public insurance, health insurance, which is the basic one. And some of them would have some supplementary and private health insurance.
So with there being 2,000 or more behavior analysts in Israel. How do those folks stay connected? Do you have associations? Do you have conferences, things like that?
Excellent questions. Yes, we do have not one, but two professional organizations. And some people are associated with the professional organizations, but I do not think that it is the main, it's certainly not the single, but also not the main way of people to stay connected. I would, across the years, I've tracked the numbers, the statistics of, the members of at least one organization, and also, how many attend the annual convention. And even if you bring, the most astute people to provide presentations and lectures and so on, you will have 300, 400 at most come to a convention, a conference, and the discrepancy between 300 and 2,000 is quite large. So I think there are some people who got disconnected completely from the professional community. And other than that, social media. So Facebook groups and WhatsApp on phone on phones in Israel is very, very strong.
Yeah.
And, as soon as you begin something that is in a group format, you have a WhatsApp group for it.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they, either work together, they have a group, or if they come to study, they have a group for that. And these are groups that maintain. And I think that's how folks maintain relationships with other colleagues in the professional community. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems pretty common across a lot of the countries I've talked to. Every nation seems to have a WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
That seems to be the
WhatsApp
primary
is in
way of
use in
connecting.
Canada. WhatsApp?
I mean, I don't use it, and I'm not familiar with any WhatsApp groups, but they certainly may exist. I just may be a Luddite there, but we have provincial associations, and typically, I think most provinces have one now.
Mm-hmm.
Again, BC and Ontario are probably the larger ones, although the eastern Atlantic provinces conference has gotten quite big in recent years. We don't have any national conferences per se in Canada. I think folks tend to travel to the States for those. Again, we're a lot closer.
Yeah. So you have the travel component as well. Interesting. We've been deliberating and discussing in the past couple of years since COVID and, wars in Israel and so on. And the Zoom platform that came in when COVID began, and something in the pattern of how people access their education, their professional education has changed. So, for example, we have been discussing if we provide a conference in Netanya or in Tel Aviv, one that you come in person to the conference, would people come? Would people do the commute, the 30 minutes, the 1 hour, depending from where you're coming, to listen to lectures? Or would they prefer to go online and buy a lecture online? It's a question. I think there is the convenience component. It's convenient to do it from home. You don't have to spend too much time. You can be more efficient. On the other hand, you lose the personal contact, right? The interaction with one another. Let's sit on a cup of coffee and have a conversation on the lecture that we just heard, and you miss that. It's been very difficult for us to get people out of their homes to come to a conference, even if the payment is very minimal. Payment minimal to none. It's an interesting phenomena. So you see that the range is absolutely huge in terms of how people consume their education and professional development. I can say on my own, for myself, as a scholar in the field and as a clinician, I organize my entire schedule to be able to attend the yearly conference once a year in the US.
Wow.
So I need to clear up 5 or 6 days of my schedule
Yeah.
to fly 12 hours across the world, and I don't miss even
Wow.
1 year. I go yearly. But yeah, I recognize that people have changed their habits in terms of consuming uh, the information,
Hmm.
and it should be taken into account. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you get to the international conferences at all?
Yeah, I go yearly to the ABAI conference, the international ones that are outside of the US.
Like this
Yes,
year
I
in
go to
Lisbon?
those as well.
Yeah, yeah.
In Lisbon, yeah. So I go and I present. Yeah, absolutely. It's for me, it's my yearly intellectual stimulation because I don't get those opportunities. I don't get those opportunities a lot in Israel. Maybe I would say even none. So for me, it's important to maintain my research, to be updated on the current, trends and changes in the field, and to maintain collaborations with others. And yes, I get to spend a lot of time on Zoom as well, but it's just different, the
Yeah.
personal contact, it's different.
Do you have, are you alone at your program or do you have colleagues that you're working with?
No, I have colleagues. So I work in two programs, as I mentioned at the beginning. So
Right.
in one program, the MA program, we have maybe five more behavior analysts, Ph.D. researchers, and clinicians. Five of them, and then maybe three more lecturers that are, like a supporting
Mm-hmm.
faculty. They provide not hardcore behavior analytic
Mm-hmm.
class, but additional supplementary classes. In my other program, the certification program, I have maybe six instructors, all phenomenal clinicians in behavior analysis. Some work with me in the Ministry of Education in the same city. So we share the same clinical unit. So I know them from their clinical background, and I've recruited them into my certification program because I thought that they would be great instructors.
Right.
So yeah, I'm blessed to be surrounded with great colleagues, absolutely great colleagues. Yeah,
So there's at
and I
least
get to
that.
see them once or
Yeah.
twice a week
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
because I do my Zooms at the last 3 hours of the day, meaning at night,
Mm-hmm.
like we do it now. The rest of the day, I'm at work, I'm teaching, or I'm in schools, delivering interventions, supervising behavior analysts. Afternoon, I'm with my family. So the Zoom time is only at night.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some of the, we've talked about regulation, of course. What are some of the future goals and projects?
Future goals. Well, I think that one of my goals as working at the academy and the academic life, I think one of my goals, it's a primary one, is to nurture future researchers, help them get inspired by research and, hooked into research and passionate about it, and send them overseas or online to get their PhD. We have to have more PhDs in behavior analysis in Israel. And the other one is just to improve the quality of services, behavior analytics services in Israel. I'm very concerned about that quality. I have many other colleagues that share the same concern. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to, make the required changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of work.
And on the podcast, Shiri, this was fun.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to get acquainted with new people
Yeah.
and also learn about other places.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah,
All right. Thanks again.
thank you, Ben.
The third secret word is education.
You can find us on Instagram and TikTok and subscribe to our YouTube page at Behavior Speak. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.